I am not the PowerPoint kind of person, so bear with me. I think I'll just pick up where she left off about when I got married and had been an organic farmer for basically 20 years. And my parents were, and still are, running an organization called NOFA, which is the Northeast Organic Farming Association. It's one of the regional organic groups in the States. And as someone who had been brought up in the organic movement, I kind of had my head up in the air about organic. Anybody know about that? Organic people, just a little bit better. Like Lisa said, when I got married and I'd been managing my parents' farm during the summer and traveling and being an activist in the winter, and that was fine until I had to make a living to provide for a family and had to be serious about making an income, and rapidly came to the realization that I wasn't that good of a farmer because my crops were exhibiting symptoms of unhealthiness. I like to use the example or the story about when our old farm dog Stubal had been living. He was 12 or 13 years old, and he was sunning himself in the driveway on a CSA day, and one of the CSA members came to pick up their bag and didn't see him and drove over his rear end and sort of grounded into the driveway, and he yelped, and they stopped and apologized, and it wasn't that bad. He just sort of got cut his skin a little bit. He got to hang out inside for a couple days, but it wasn't that bad, so we stuck him back outside. I was going to check on him a couple days later and see where the cut was. There were some maggots in there, flies had laid eggs, and people who know about how nature takes care of things, the rotten flesh, it's good to get rid of it. And maggots will do that. They'll eat out the rotten flesh and actually clean out the wound. It's actually a good thing, but I was didn't know that, and was sort of like sick to my stomach seeing this. And I had a 5-gallon bucket in my hand, and I was going out to the potato patch to knock Colorado potato beetles off the potato plants. Anybody know about Colorado potato beetles? Those little red guys that magically reproduce and eat your potato plants alive. We had this thing we did, which was we take 5-gallon buckets and we knock the potato bugs off the potato plants every 2 days to keep the potato plants alive a little bit longer before they get eaten alive. And I was thinking about the fact that there was larvae eating my dog, and I was repulsed by that. And there were larvae eating my potato plants, and I thought that was totally normal. And we sometimes become inured to things because of our ignorance. I would suggest nature speaks to us very directly and very clearly, and oftentimes we don't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear. If I was raising chickens that they were being eaten alive by a flesh-eating fungus, like a staph infection or something, would I, in good conscience, slaughter those chickens and sell them to you or feed them to my children? Probably not. If I've got cucumbers that have powdery mildew, which is a little fungus that lives on the leaf surface and turns them white and then brown, and in most people's cases, that's what kills your tomatoes, your cucumbers and your zucchini and your winter squash every year, a flesh-eating fungus. Right? Being eaten alive by a flesh-eating fungus is a sign of not being healthy. And yet it happens to our crops, most people's crops, most of the time, and we have in conventional ag strategies for applying toxins to kill the pathogen. But that's responding to the symptom, not responding to the cause. And so, as I was thinking about all this kind of stuff, I thought maybe I could make a living farming if my plants were healthy. And I think that was the first major step towards humility, was acknowledging that I wasn't a good farmer, and I was not producing healthy plants. And so I engaged and have been for more than 10 years now, on this quest to understand how to do a better job. And lo and behold, most of everything we need to know has already been figured out, right? It's not like the answers aren't known. It's just that we haven't had the humility and the, attention span to apply them. And so I've been working first through an organization called Remineralize the Earth, and then We founded a project called the Real Food Campaign, and then for the past 8 or 9 years, we've had this organization called the Bionutrient Food Association, which is an organization whose mission is to increase quality in the food supply, working to educate mostly growers, at least historically, about how to do a better job. Those people who are willing to acknowledge maybe they aren't doing a good enough job, or maybe they could do better. We've been working with them mostly around the states. We've done a couple of courses up here in Canada. We've got local chapters in 12 different states. There's this really interesting correlation between healthy plants and plants that are more productive, and plants that have more pest and disease resistance, plants that have crops that are more nutritious, plants that are critically involved in sequestering carbon, crops that are more nutritious have better flavor, better aroma. They actually have more nutritive value, which means they have those compounds and elements in them which provide your body what it needs to be healthy. The synergies here are brilliant. I mean, the alliances that we can make across the broader movement, I think, are really quite exciting. And so I can go on for hours and hours on all kinds of aspects of this, and I'm just going to try to cover a few of the points here. I think I'm supposed to be talking about health today. I presumed human health, but plant health, ecological health, cultural health, psychological health, spiritual health. Which topic can we go on, right? I mean, they're all, I think, extraordinarily interrelated. Only when the bottom of the food chain is functioning well, only when the microbes in the soil are flourishing, is the carbon sequestered, right? The carbon is sequestered because the plants are making the sugar and feeding it to them. Only when they're flourishing is the plant being fed the nutrients it needs to build the compounds it needs to be healthy. I don't know how many minutes I have. I'll just start going. And I got lots of minutes left? Yeah, all right, good. Let me just run through a few pieces here. I think most of this has been covered by other presenters. Sometimes it helps to hear things framed slightly differently. Plants are green. Yeah. Right. Chloroplast, photosynthesis. People know about this? Yeah. Repeating here. Carbon dioxide, sunlight, water equals oxygen and sugar. Oxygen is taken out of the leaf, goes up into the atmosphere. Sugar is taken out of the leaf, goes into the soil to feed the soil life. Because the plants don't have the ability to digest the soil. Right? You know about this? It's kind of like humans. We don't have the ability to digest food. Heard about this one? When you're born, how many people are living inside of you? Between your mouth and your rear end? Not many. 0, right? The alimentary canal doesn't have anybody in it when you're born. That's what colostrum is for. Colostrum, that which comes out of the mother's breast after birth, before milk, is there to establish gut flora, which is all the people that live inside of you, because you can't digest your food. We have this fraudulent concept called kingdoms. There's the plant kingdom and there's the animal kingdom. You heard this one? Baloney. What percentage of the cells in your body are human? 10 or less, right? If there's 10 trillion cells in your body, max 1 trillion of them are human. 9 trillion of them are other species, other organisms, other kingdoms. We are all ecosystems. You are an ecosystem. In Ayurveda, they say the health of the gut determines the health of the organism, right? They look at your poop and tell you how healthy you are, right? It's really simple. The vast majority of the life in your body is not human. As that ecosystem functions, so you function. You are a representative of that ecosystem. When you're born, it's established in that gut flora that helps you digest your food. Plants can't digest the soil. In the olden days, before they invented fertilizer, plants ate, as Elaine was telling us earlier, through the byproducts of bacterial and fungal digestion. The plants make sugar in their leaves, they inject it into the soil to feed the soil life. The soil life eat it, reproduce, go about their merry lives, digest the soil, exude their acids and bases, solubilize the nutrients, take up the copper, it goes into the leaf, take up the calcium, it goes into the plant. The plant builds its body out of those nutrients by feeding soil life. It's a symbiotic dynamic. The carbon dioxide taken out of the atmosphere to make sugar is injected into the soil to feed the soil life. The more the plant grows, the bigger the leaves are, the more sugar is manufactured, the more carbon is taken out of the atmosphere and put into the soil to feed the soil life. The more the soil life feeds the plant, the more the plant grows. It's a virtuous cycle. So it's only when the bottom of the food chain is flourishing that the plant's able to flourish, because it's the bottom of the food chain that feeds the plant. There's this thing called pathogens. People have heard about, pests and diseases. We've got pests and diseases in our bodies. Animals have pests and diseases. Plants have pests and diseases. I want to just talk about this for a second here. If there was a bale of hay somewhere in this hall, I'm guessing one of you might have considered sitting on it, but none of you would have considered eating it. Fair? Fair? If someone let a cow in, she probably would not have considered sitting on it, but she might have considered eating it. Fair? Why is a bale of hay food for a cow and not for a human? Because a cow has 4 stomachs. Because a cow has the ability to digest compounds that a human can't. Everyone's okay with that? A cow has a more sophisticated digestive tract than you do. Okay? I'm going to suggest that you have a more sophisticated digestive tract than a Colorado potato beetle does. I'm going to suggest a Colorado potato beetle has a more sophisticated digestive tract than Phytophthora or Rhizoctonia or Pythium or Alternaria or any of these other, bacterial or fungal diseases. What makes a bale of hay indigestible for us is the level of complexity of compounds in it. Our gut just simply can't digest them. Well, what makes food flavorful for us is the complexity of compounds. Anybody ever had a tomato from, here are these Canadian tomatoes from hot houses? Do you get them sometimes? Sometimes they come from Florida too, or Mexico. Hot house tomatoes or hydroponic tomatoes. You ever had one of those? It looks like a tomato. Sure don't taste like a tomato. Ever had a tomato fresh out of the garden? You are an animal, right? You have a really sophisticated nutrient monitoring device. A couple of them. Your nose and your tongue. Really sophisticated nutrient monitoring devices. When you eat a tomato that does not taste like a tomato, that is your animal instinct telling you it's junk. I don't care if it's certified organic. I don't care if it's local. I don't care if it's permaculture. I don't care if it's biodynamics. You are an animal. The labels are tangential. They're oftentimes marketing, right? You are actually hardwired with the ability to discern, and no one talks about this. Ever had a peach that was ripe that you picked off of a tree? Anybody had that experience? A few of us here know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then you have one of those things that they sell as peaches in the store, and you're like, I know that's not a peach. Because I've had a peach, and that ain't a peach. From a foundational standpoint, they're remarkably different, right? Biochemically, nutritionally, their effect on the ecosystem. So what we're talking about at the BFA is the quality of the crop. I don't care if it's local, I don't care if it's organic, I care what it tastes like. I care what the nutritional caliber is, because that correlates directly with how it was grown. That correlates directly with the effect on the ecosystem. One of the best ways to short circuit the process of carbon being taken out of the atmosphere and put into the soil, and we know what the best way is, one of the best ways besides tillage? Add fertilizer. If you add fertilizer technically is a compound that is soluble. I like to use the example of an IV drip or maybe Gatorade. People went to the hospital, they heard about this thing. They put an IV drip into your blood. Like, you can stay alive with liquid nutrients being injected into your bloodstream. Is that how nature evolved you to digest food? Well, fertilizer is not how nature evolved plants to digest food. But functionally, fertilizer is a soluble nutrient injected directly into the plant's bloodstream. It short circuits the digestive tract. I don't care if it's organic fertilizer. I don't care if it's permaculture fertilizer. I don't care if it's biodynamic fertilizer. Fertilizer, at least in the US, means soluble nutrient. Technically, by law. There's a really interesting conversation here, and we can begin to understand how all these different allies are all interrelated. We suggest one of the most exciting things that's going on right now is the epidemic levels of degenerative disease. Right? Beyond the cataclysm globally with the ecosystem is the cataclysm globally with health. There's this thing called, there's a guy named Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody heard about that one? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's this like things you do for the greater good, that's like level 4. When everything else in your life is taken care of, then you have energy to worry about the greater good. So I would suggest global warming, climate change is on level 4 for most people. I would suggest the health of your children is about level 1. And health of yourself, maybe, is level 1. So what happens when you, as an animal, don't get the nutrients that you need to build your body with? You begin to break down. You begin to degenerate, right? There's this really interesting work done about the Human Genome Project, where they mapped the human DNA, which is a big, long compound, and they traced out all the different enzymes that are needed to build one strand of human DNA. There's 25 different elements required to build one strand of human DNA. Copper, zinc, manganese, boron, cobalt, molybdenum, selenium, chromium, vanadium. How many elements can you name? How many cells do you have in your body? Every single one of your cells has DNA in it. How many trillion times do you need 25 different elements for your DNA to exist? Not counting your hormones and your glands and all the rest of the stuff. When your food does not have flavor in it, it does not have nutrition. Your body is built out of the food you eat. When you eat food with no nutrition in it, you build a body which is falling apart. You do that for a couple generations, you get all these, diseases, genetic diseases, breaks in the DNA that come from malnutrition. Functionally, we are not getting the nutrients into our bodies we need to operate. And so we are falling apart physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. I would say it's all beautifully interrelated. So the idea here is that instead of focusing on all the problems and all the horrible things that are going on, let's just focus on eating food that tastes good. There's wisdom in the permaculture community about how to do that. There's wisdom in the biodynamic community about how to do that. There's wisdom in the organic community, wisdom in the conventional community. There's all kinds of wisdom about how to grow food that tastes good. But let's let that be what we're working towards, because food that tastes good can only be grown in soil that is where carbon is being sequestered, right? Where water is percolating through, right? The more polyculture, perennial, minimal tillage your system is, the more biological system function you have, the healthier the plants are, the more the food tastes good. The more the food tastes good, the more the plants are healthy, the less diseases there are, the less pests there are, the less pesticides you need, the less fungicides you need. Anybody got a problem with agribusiness? Let's create a reality where farmers don't need their products anymore. Right? If you had farmers producing healthy plants, they wouldn't need fertilizer. They wouldn't need insecticides. They wouldn't need fungicides. If they weren't needing those products, they wouldn't be giving their money to agribusiness. I'm not sure how it works up here in Canada, but the way it works in the States is agribusiness has enough money to buy the senators to write the farm bill. Right? You know how that works? You have that up here too? Yeah. So let's create a reality where farmers aren't giving them money in the first place because they don't need their products. The question is, how do we do this? How do we create a reality where people are focusing on quality, nutritive value of food? And I'll just end, I got about a 2-minute warning, I'm trying to respect it. With that, this has been a fantasy of mine for a number of years now, is that we could organize people around flavor and aroma. And there's this whole thing with little gizmos. Anybody know about this? Everybody's got little gizmos in their pockets and stuff. About this, screens, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, all kinds of screens they got, all kinds of little gizmos. So, and they get distracted by them, right? Like, Anyways, I got all kinds of commentaries, not enough time for them. Our idea here basically is to give consumers the ability to test quality at point of purchase. So be able to go to the grocery store, go to the farmer's market, wherever you go and say, burp, grab, burp, decent, to literally choose the most flavorful bag of carrots off the shelf, which is the most nutritious bag of carrots off the shelf. I talked to Whole Foods about this a couple of years ago, more than a couple, and they said, there's no way we're going to help you with this project, but when you're 2 years away from having it, please come tell us. Because we'll give all of our growers 2 years to meet standard. There's this thing called money. When I was in my 20s, I was very idealistic. I thought if we just spoke truth, everyone would listen and they'd understand and they'd change their ways. I'm not that young anymore. I think money talks. Ronnie told us last night that, people spend $7.7 trillion on food every year. I suggest if people who care about their children and themselves, which is most people, understood that some food will actually heal you and some food will actually kill you, and they could choose at point of purchase based on that, not based on labeling and marketing, we might get some shifts in the way things are done. So, long story short, our organization has finally gotten past the stage of fantasizing about such a tool. In the past year, it seems like technology has caught up with the fantasy, and so we now have the capacity to basically mass produce a handheld spectrometer that a consumer can use. Might cost a couple $100 the first generation. Second or third generation will be inside of a smartphone. We're launching it at our conference next month in Massachusetts, the first prototype of our handheld spectrometer. But the idea here is we give consumers the ability to test quality, and they, through their own self-interest, inspire the entire supply chain to focus on quality. And the implications, the correlations, ripple across the whole culture and ecosystem. So I would suggest, I think my topic here today was supposed to be health. I really think that the health of the ecosystem, the health of each of us individually, the health of our communities. I didn't get to talk about spiritual health at all, which I think there's some wonderful pieces here. It's really all interrelated, and I know there's a lot of conversation in this world about problems and about struggles and fights and all that kind of stuff. I would suggest that there are so many of us who want the same things, and we need to find a way to coordinate around building the solutions we're looking for. We need those strategies, and I hope that one of those strategies can be this focus on increasing our own health and the health of our children. So I think I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.